name's Saskia Wilson-Brown. I'm the founder and executive director of the Institute for Art and Olfaction. And what we're here for today is a talk by the lovely Daria Donina. This is part of our Olfactory Research Notes program, a lecture series that presents important research done in olfaction directly from the people who do it. So Daria, it's a delight to have you here, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Hi to everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks to the Institute for inviting me. This is a small step for mankind, but a giant step for me, as you say, probably. I'm not a native English speaker, so I'm sorry for any inconveniences concerning my level of English. However, I'll try to do my best. Today, I'm going to share the story of my first olfactory exhibition based on historical research, the history of the Soviet perfume-making industry, women who played a huge part in it, more than men did, and the evolution of the attitude towards perfumery at large, and precisely Krasnaya Moskva in the USSR. The Soviet perfume industry produced a wide range of fragrances, but now, a century later, only one brand remains in the collective memory, and that is Krasnaya Moskva, or Red Moscow. So it became quintessential perfume for the socialist women, such as Chanel No. 5 did for the women in capitalist countries. This olfactory exhibition invites visitors to view the Soviet perfumery not only as part of the bigger beauty industry, but also as a commendatory of everyday life in the USSR. The story will be told through the voices of ordinary women, those who long remained in the background, yet whose silage still lingers in the air. Women reigned at every level of the perfume industry in Russia, from the packaging lines to upper ranks of the People's Commissariat, which is like ministry in the USSR. They were also its primary consumers. And no matter how gender policy shifted or what ideals of femininity were upheld by Soviet propaganda, women stood their ground, defending their right to self-expression, even within the limited offerings of the beauty industry in the USSR. In the 2 decades which we are talking of, between 2 world wars, perfume underwent a striking transformation in the public imagination, and in the 20s it was rarely mentioned without scorn. It was symbol of poor taste and bourgeois affectation from which a Soviet citizen was expected to turn away. And yet 10 years later, elegant shops had appeared in the center of Moscow where one could sample different scents by inserting a simple coin into a machine and seek advice from a beauty consultant. So let me briefly present myself. So my name is Daria. I firstly graduated from the Faculty of Journalism at Moscow State University, specializing in literary and artistic criticism. And then for 12 years, I've been working in media, producing a variety of multimedia content, ranging from infographics to documentary videos and complex multimedia long reads, similar to the famous Snowfall by the New York Times, published in 2012. Our project repeatedly won some awards for data visualization or digital storytelling, and in 2022, I became too annoyed by digital. And well, I guess after the pandemics, everybody felt this. And I asked myself, where and how else can I tell my stories? What if I switch from multimedia to multisensory? And by that time, my interest towards scents and olfactory culture has grown significantly. I've tried myself and given lectures, podcasting, and so on. And looking for the new fields of storytelling, I've decided to get closer to the museums. And last summer, I completed the master's program in management of cultural heritage in Moscow School of Social and Economic Sciences. And there, observing my increasing interest in that sense within culture, especially in museums, I wrote a thesis on olfactory heritage and the prospects of its use. And here are some of my insights from my thesis. Which I have more or less encountered over the past year when I tried to move from theory to practice and create my first exhibition. We still have troubles attributing historical sense to tangible or intangible heritage and not knowing how to expose them to public. And I guess there are more or less obvious, but let me point out the main thing. I think that due to dynamic nature of scents, we should consider them as performances and more than aesthetic objects, such as most museum stuff. And during this exhibition, my curatorial task was to elaborate a form that is aesthetically organic to the specific story and define the boundaries to this olfactory performance. Um, in the last chapter of my thesis, where I came from theory to practical ideas, I mentioned the upcoming centennial anniversary of the perfume Krasnaya Moskva as a great opportunity to hold a cultural event that would undoubtedly attract public attention, because this perfume is disliked by many post-Soviet people, but known to everyone. And I suggested treating Red Moscow as a symbol, as a mascot, and simply as a starting point for a stream of memories connecting several generations of Muscovites. In December 2024, thanks to my classmate and co-curator Yelena, I was invited to create the exhibition devoted to this jubilee. It is hosted by the Zotov Center. Zotov Center is a fancy cultural space in Moscow with a mission of researching and promoting constructivism, a groundbreaking art movement that originated in Russia in the early 20th century. The centennial of Red Moscow perfectly fits in the timeline of constructivism, so 20s and 30s, so it was a match. Interesting fact is that the venue was initially Soviet bread factory, bakery number 5, named after Vasily Zotov, one of the leaders of Soviet food industry. And in Soviet times, perfume industry was accidentally a part of food industry at that time. So everything is more connected than I ever expected. Long story short, they appreciated the idea and we started working this out and being on pretty tough schedule from the very beginning because it took only 6 months till we opened this exhibition and on July 10th. So, a few words about storytelling principles. Let's imagine if you had to tell the story of Soviet women through a single wardrobe item, what would it be? Maybe a red headscarf, maybe a rare pair of seam stockings, maybe a red Moscow perfume. I'd pick the last one. It is believed that Krasnaya Moskva or Red Moscow is the most famous Soviet fragrance, and it celebrates centennial anniversary in 2025. It has witnessed much over the years, gracing the nightstands of olfactory workers, the dressing tables of high-ranking officials, traveling across the country in the cosmetic bags of Lyubov Orlova and other popular actresses, enticing tourists and research of fun souvenir from the USSR during Olympics at the 80s, for example. But despite its iconic status, the origins of Red Moscow are still shrouded in mystery. We still do not have any archival document saying when, why, and who actually created this fragrance. Our narrative balances between opposites. Thus, we contrasted complex, man-made, handcrafted perfumery scents with environmental ones, because without context, even symbolically presented, it is difficult to grasp how original the perfumer's creations were, especially for us, spoiled by the modern range of fragrances. We just don't understand these nuances. But this is a story not only about the city, not only about women who inhabit it, but also about scent as a carrier of this very olfactory heritage. We all know, and I'm not saying anything breaking here, that the influence of aromas on human memory is physiologically based. Encountering a familiar odorant activates the limbic system. Within it, the amygdala is responsible for the emotional evaluation of events, while the hippocampus handles long-term memories. And this is why encountering a scent from the past can sometimes awaken very, very old memories and helps us to vividly and bodily relive these events anew. And during the exhibition, we draw people's attention to how strongly scents are connected with the experience of the past. For example, for the former people, those who after the revolution have lost their previous social status, privileges, identity, in 20s in Moscow, as well as accidentally for entire community of white immigrants. The aromas of pre-revolutionary perfumes act like soothing balm, like a beacon of stability in this new hostile world. For the creator of Red Moscow, French perfumer Auguste Michel, French-born, who was accidentally stranded in the USSR, making a twist on the popular perfume of the bygone era, L'Oregon Coty, could also have served as kind of relief. Because for those who survived the Great Patriotic, not because, just those who survived Great Patriotic War, Red Moscow itself became a happy memory of a peaceful life. And for many of us, Red Moscow is a memory of our grandmothers and aunts and neighbors and first teachers. And the question is, will this memorial relay end with our generation, or will someone carry it forward into the future? Because nowadays, Red Moscow is a perfume used only by, let's say, grandmothers in the best case.
Daria,
Um,
may
mm,
I jump in? I'm sorry to interrupt your flow. Is it possible to
sure.
present your slides with you next to them just because your beautiful face is blocking some of the content?
Uh-huh.
I'm
Um,
sorry to interrupt your flow, really.
oh, well, how do I do this then?
Well, then, you know what? If you don't know how immediately, don't worry about it. We'll just we'll get it to folks after.
mm, okay, if you figure out how can I easily do it, I
No,
will.
no. Let's just
I
carry
will.
on, folks. I'm sorry. We'll make sure to get that data to you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Daria.
Um, so the exhibition plan of our narrative. Um, we've invented the generic image of the woman, the character that we kept in mind while we were creating this narrative. And it's compiled from dozens of stories of Soviet women who contributed to the reconstruction of the beauty industry after the revolution. The first female image that one can see at the exhibition is Paranya, whom we see here in the little circle. Paranya from the silent movie House on Trubne. She's a young, poorly educated girl with frightened eyes who somehow, most often by accident, just left the countryside for the big city. She's running through the streets of Moscow with no sense of direction, showing passers-by the piece of paper with an address of her far relative whom she expects to help her and give her shelter for the first weeks in Moscow. And this is how the story kicks off. Then the exhibition divided in two sections. All of them are named here on the plan. And then, following Paranya, the visitor finds himself in a rapidly expanding Soviet capital. She explores the city, gets a job on a soap factory, learns about the underside of urban life during that period, I mean, new economic policy. Then she becomes acquainted with the large trust TG and its subordinate organizations. And as years go by, the lyrical heroine rises in status, and perhaps now she is a workshop supervisor, or maybe a head of chemical laboratory, or a party cell leader at the factory. So she's not the only one who changes because Moscow does the same. And by the 30s, it is yet another city, spacious, prosperous, and Parani can now probably afford shopping in the most beautiful store with perfumes. Which was opened in 1936 on the first floor of the Moscow Hotel. And who knows, maybe she's even ruling the whole industry because women at that time used to make sometimes fascinating careers. Um, but after the Second World War, we see through the cinematic images how the target audience of Red Moscow gradually matures from schoolgirls in the 50s to elderly women in the 80s. And one can imagine that this entire story was told to us by that very grandmother who came to conquer Moscow in 2020s. Sorry, in 1920s. So, for example, we can imagine that this Piranha with whom we started this trip, she follows us during the whole exhibition, and it all ends with the perestroika and with the collapse of the Soviet Union in the end of the 80s. So let's move on to the proletarian Moscow. Um, in March 1918, the Bolsheviks moved the capital from Petrograd to Moscow. Um, and after the formation of the USSR in the end of 1922, the city status as capital was finally secured. Thus, a new Red Moscow appeared on the map of the Soviet Union. In just few years, the city's population has doubled. A capital could not keep up with the influx of people, housing, commercial space, transport. The utilities were unable to meet the rapidly growing urban demand. Moscow became a testing ground for new architecture, new culture of everyday life, and yet this utopian garden city did not smell of flowers at all. Smoke from factory chimneys obscured the sky, and from the carbon-laden clouds fell an invisible dry rain or soot. And even then, concerns about air quality had already begun to surface, because the author of the pamphlet New City sounded the alarm. One needs a daily dose of clean air, and aeration. This is 2.6 cubic meters of air per day. Do we have those 2.6 cubic meters? Let us not forget that how cramped are our living spaces. So people were living in very tight conditions. So here are some quotes from literature describing the situation. The Soviet citizen was adjusting to the new rules of communal living and testing both spatial and personal boundaries. Uh, Literary pieces gives us a lot of pictures how it looked like a Brownian motion of bodies across never-ending construction sites created a cacophony of smells and sounds. When a wave of former villagers flooded into the city in the early 20s, public health education had to be taken very seriously because overcrowded living conditions and neglect of basic hygiene practices led to the spread of diseases such as tuberculosis and typhus. Speaking of the Speaking at the All-Russian Congress of Soviets, Lenin put it bluntly: either lice will defeat socialism or socialism will defeat lice. In Moscow, according to Ilya Ehrenburg, everyone was obsessed with hygiene. They lived in cramped up spaces. Some did not change their shirts from Christmas till Easter, so that the shirt crawled with life, but they respected hygiene. So I'm quoting Ehrenburg here. Even the diner, where tripe or cabbage soup chummed gloomily in pots, where people sipped bitter tea and spilled blood, though quietly, even those greasy spoon proudly called itself Hygiene Diner. So it was the name of a diner, Hygiene, because it was very important to promote the very concept of hygiene and sanitarian norms. This exhibition is dedicated not only to perfume, but to Red Moscow itself, the young capital of Soviet state, which in 20s and 30s experienced a second birth. Here, the angular avant-garde commune houses stood beside the ornate architecture of old Moscow. The factory workers, builders, and Stakhanovites shared living spaces with Nepmen, city dandies, and yesterday's bourgeoisie. And scents, too, were among these agents of the chaos. To imagine the olfactory landscape of the city, I've collected up to 400 scents or olfactory metaphors ever mentioned in literature or memoirs about Moscow of the 20s and summarized this data in the form of an interactive infographics. Unfortunately, it is available only in Russian, but let me show how it works. So in the center, we have Moscow, and then we have a sum of different types of places, like I don't know, uh, streets, or I don't know, factories, railroads, and every place has a significant sense. So here we have 400 scents. Some of them have beautiful and fascinating intersections, and every scent has its proof in the form of literary quotation, which is shown here on the left. Some of scents, if we will choose one, may appear in different places. Some scents are metaphorical. Some scents are very concrete. Many of scents are not pleasant at all, as you can imagine. So I wish I could translate it in English too, but 400 literary quotes are pretty tough
We'll
to
have to find a
translate.
volunteer translator for you because that would be amazing to have in English for all of us.
Yeah, probably I have to do this. Yeah, it will be great.
Oh
So
my
this
God.
is the variety of scents connected with apartments. Um, so the precise rooms or maybe corridors. So a lot of things to say here, but let's be more realistic. So 5 cents out of this scheme, bathhouse, bread, kerosene, cheap tobacco, and lilacs are on display in the exhibition. So here I attach the QR code on YouTube, and we can look how it works. I hope you see it.
Как пахла Москва в 20
Do you? So it's in Russian, so I speak in Russian, but it's subtitled in English. Probably we will not. I will not show you the whole video, but just for the impression. So here is this infographics.
Дальше у нас лучами расходятся разные типы пространств. Улицы, госучреждения, фабрики, бани, квартиры, клубы, кино, больницы. И вот из каждого можем узнать, чем пахнет. Например, в больнице пахло валерьянкой, денатуратом, камфорой и духами, например. Или, например, на рынке пахло смолой, дегтем, рыбой, самогоном, нюхательным табаком. Дальше есть у нас еще и подкатегории пространств. Например, из жилья у нас отходят отдельно подъезды, кухни, спальни, коридоры. Соответственно, в кухнях пахло маслом, пудрой, мясным, мылом, щами, борщом, хлебом. И у каждого из этого запаха есть в каждом из этих запахов есть пруф, собственно, из литературы. Соответственно, когда вы нажимаете на концевую точку, например, суп, например,
And so here we have 5 olfactory spots
которых разогревали и готовили
with the scent that I've already mentioned.
запах хлеба, единственный гастрономический запах из этой плеяды, самый такой, понятно, доступный аромат, и мы специально долго искали запах не свежего багета или там круассана или какой-то деликатной выпечки французской, а чтобы это был запах настоящего серого такого кислого хлеба, сделанного на закваске, такой максимально пролетарский вариант. И, наконец, запах махорки, то есть такого дешевого.
And this is how it's organized beneath. So.
Устроено. На обратной стороне этой стены инсталлирован такой кубик из оргстекла с перфорацией. Внутри него лежит гипсовый кусочек, такой тоже еще один маленький кубик, в который мы впрыскиваем из шприца одушку где-то раз в 2 недели, и она продолжает источать аромат на протяжении этого времени. Вот, собственно, весь секрет. Но зрители видят ничего, просто вот такое вот темное место с перфорацией.
Daria, do you think you could pop that link to that YouTube video in the chat just so people can look at it?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
This is the whole playlist here. Let me.
Well, we can do it after class too. I'll get you to send it to me.
No, I guess it's easy to do it right now.
Ключевая интерактивная инсталляция на выставке Красная Москва.
Sorry.
It's okay to hear you talking in Russian. Great, we got it. Thank you, Daria. Appreciate it.
Anyway, the links to the videos are also in these QR codes on the slides if someone is missing. So let's proceed. Probably our character Paranya found her job at the former brocart factory, which now is famous by the name Novaya Zarya or New Dawn. In the 19th century, perfume and soap manufacturers were established by French-born manufacturers, flourished in Moscow. Adolphe Sieu, Émile Baudelot, Alphonse Rallet, and his main competitor Henri Brocard, who founded his business in 1864, contributed to the formation of the Russian perfume and cosmetics industry. Over the next half-century, Brocard & Co. Not only earned the title of supplier to the imperial court, but also became the largest enterprise, the largest enterprise of its kind in the whole Europe. Brocard's workshops and warehouses occupied the vast area of 1.6 hectares in Arsenyevsky Lane, which is now Pavla Andreeva Street. And the success of Brocard manufactory is due not only to Henry's skill in producing remarkable floral colognes, but also to the efforts of his wife Charlotte, an exceptional marketer. We see them pictured here on the slide, on the, yeah. So in 1918, the enterprise was nationalized and given a new name, the State Zamoskvoretsky Perfume and Soap Factory number 5. Just like Chanel number 5, but factory number 5. Well, okay. It was soon renamed more concisely Novaya Zarya or New Dawn. During the Civil War, the workforce reduced from 1,000 to 200 workers, and they produced soap for the needs of the front. And nobody cared about perfume for sure, but the demand for hygiene products was high. However, the Soviet authorities had more pressing concerns. Government agencies were gradually relocating to Moscow from St. Petersburg, and when it came to state administration for the production of state insignia or goznak, so those who printed money, the Council of People's Commissars proposed giving the factory premises to Goznak, and so factory number 5 was saved from liquidation just by a miracle, the miracle named Dunya Uvarova. Yevdokia Uvarova was a legendary figure. According to the late Soviet sources, Uvarova began working for the Brocards as a domestic servant in 1912. And amid the growing unrest among workers, she embraced communist ideas and joined the party in 1917. In a publication marking the centenary of Novaya Zarya, Yevdokia's career is presented not as a chain of coincidences that led her to the leadership position in the chaos of revolution, but as the path of a committed communist devoted to the fate of her comrades. The young manager went to Lenin and Kalinin to defend the factory. She remembered Lenin's reply for the rest of her life. So Lenin said, "The factory must remain. Just look at how deeply the female workers understand and manage the factory." As a result, Goznak still occupied 6 buildings of the factory, once fitted with the latest equipment, while Novaya Zarya received the dilapidated premises of the former wallpaper factory next door. The workers carried out repairs themselves, moved the equipment, and resumed production using pre-revolutionary stocks of raw materials. Those were expected to last for 3 years, but Novaya Zarya factory still exists to this day. In 1923, the perfume industry ranked second among all industrial sectors in terms of proportion of women employed. At Novaya Zarya, women held up to 85% of all jobs. 85%. One of the points of the Bolshevik program was to expand the labor force by including women. In return, women were promised support in all fronts, in daily life, in child rearing, but gender equality existed more in words than in practice. In reality, a study of Soviet family labor routines by economist Stanislav Strumilin in 1922 showed that due to imbalance in domestic responsibilities, an 8-hour workday of a female factory worker turned into a 15-hour day with less than 10% of her time left for rest. So this balance existed only on words. Let me put on the light because I feel like the evening is coming in Moscow.
That's like you, morning here.
Yeah, you have morning. We are preparing for
I'm
the
having
night.
my coffee. You're having your bedtime drinks.
Yeah, right. So during the Civil War, the workforce reduced, the workforce of Novaya Zarya, and nobody cared about perfume, obviously, but to promote hygiene, pamphlets were published, household conferences were held, parades of toothbrushes were organized at factories, but the fruits of such efforts grew slowly. In order to illustrate the vibe of the early Soviet soap factory, we've made an olfactory installation out of 1,000 bars of strawberry soap, which scent is well known by most post-Soviet people. So this is how it looks like. Let me show you a small video. So it was an olfactory installation which produced scent just by default.
Для рассказа о деятельности фабрики «Новая заря» в начале 20-х годов, которая была сконцентрирована, конечно, не на парфюмерии, а на мыле, коего тогда был колоссальный дефицит, мы создали такую ольфакторную инсталляцию, состоящую почти из 1000 брусков земляничного мыла. Мыло земляничное было одной из самых популярных мыл в Советском Союзе, уступая, может быть, семейному или там яичному, или, может быть, хозяйственному. Но оно было одной из самых дорогих и самых приятно пахнущих. И этот аромат до сих пор помнят многие поколения москвичей и всех постсоветских граждан.
Well, and then we switch to another Moscow. As I've previously said, we've built our narrative on the opposites, on the contrasts, and so we have proletarian Moscow, and on the other side there is a Nepman's Moscow. The city fell asleep, and the Nepman awoke. Champagne flowed freely, the rhythms of foxtrot and Charleston filled the air with delirium. The new economic policy, introduced in 1921, was a breath of fresh air after several years of war communism. Thanks to private traders, forgotten fruits of civilization reappeared on shop counters: bread rolls, sausages, caviar, powder, perfume, including imported ones. In Moscow, main spots for selling imported perfumery were Kuznetsky Most Street and Petrovka Street. Perfume by weight, cottage cheaper, perfume by the gram, chanted the street vendor monotonously outside the arcade that had once belonged to his father probably, but now for the former class, perfume was more than just a decoration, more than just a piece of beauty industry. Favorite scents from previous life not only left a pleasant trail, but also evoked lost comforts of the past. But for unworldly communist youth, perfume was a forbidden fruit. Once tasted, it could lead them astray from the true Komsomol path. In the press of the 20s, the Nepman was portrayed as a kind of a tempter, with women his primary victims. One critic of modern morals wrote about a female factory worker who went to dance, then began to wear perfume and powder, and ended up buying leather pumps and gold medallion, leaving the Komsomol and marrying the Nepman. So, like a biblical story about tempted woman who laid for the Nepman. As a precaution, the female workforce at the one factory resolved in 1924 not to powder or paint ourselves. It was claimed that as women's cultural level rises, all such cosmetics will disappear on their own because there's no use of it. A few quotes again. In the new Soviet ideology, cleanliness became the alternative to beauty. Perfume and cosmetics were condemned not only as symbols of Philistinism and reverence for the capitalist West, but also paradoxically often appeared alongside dirt, mustiness, and stench. Images of decay, both visual and olfactory, became a distinctive feature of the class portrait of the Soviet everyman and the enemy of all people. Let's take a look at this quote describing the Nepman's party. And now they were dancing, holding hands all together, feet flying, falling, and violin tearing at the air, a drunken, frenzied violin quickening the tempo. In the room there raged a wild witch's sabbath, half naked and disheveled. A sharp smell filled the air: sweat, vodka, corpse, powder, leather, and something unspeakably vile, like the odor of a gravely ill person. These scents together gave the portrait of a filthy, hypocritical person who tries to hide his deceitful and old-fashioned beliefs and tastes, masking them with perfume and powder. All this smells very bad. All these threats reek of a complete political decomposition, warned anti-Trotskyist brochures in 1928, the same year the NEP was ended. A Soviet person could not decay. So it was ideological point. Soviet person burnt. Like in Maxim Gorky's story about Danka, where the hero tears out his burning heart from his chest and lights the way for his tribesmen, by the way, it was precisely in those years that the first crematoriums began to appear in the USSR, because even after death, one was supposed to burn for the idea not to rot in the mud and damp earth. So it was all linked. The peak of NEP came in 1926. In the memoirs of Muscovite Georgy Andreevsky, one incident stands out. In 1926, the police busted a factory producing all these Lorigan and Coty knocks off. After the revolution, Lorigan became a symbol of a bygone era and an object of desire for Nepman beauties and olfactory brand for the former class. In the film Katka Rained Apples, a street vendor under a bridge sells imported perfumes, although the scene takes place in Leningrad. Similar episodes often appear in Moscow memoirs of that time. Let me quote. In the 20s, on the corner of Petrovka and Theatre Square, Muscovites, mostly women, sold all sorts of odds and ends. You constantly hear cyclamen, Lorigan, Coty, Chypre. Some sold tinted water as perfume, scenting only the stopper, which they'd let the buyer smell. Many former people sold here. No wonder that press dubbed the regulars at this market trade-in princesses. The popular legend claims that Red Moscow was nothing more than a repackaged version of the Empress's favorite bouquet, rebranded for the Soviet era. That bouquet was also composed by Auguste Michel during his time at the Brocard manufactory. Today, a century later, this hypothesis is impossible to verify. However, the similarity between two scents cannot be ruled out, especially considering that Novaya Zarya survived in the early years using pre-revolutionary stockpiles of raw materials. We're still not sure whether Red Moscow is linked to the famous pre-revolutionary perfume. But what can be said with certainty is that in terms of fragrance style, Red Moscow is the heir of the spicy floral oriental Lorigan by Coty, a perfume beloved in Russia. And according to Losmatek in Versailles, who have the archives of Brocard at their disposal, Empress's favorite bouquet recipe looks very much like Lorigan too. In 1905, François Coty created one of the most sought-after perfumes of the 20th century, the Floriental Oriental Spicy Floral Lorigan. Yet many fell in love with this aroma, not through perfume but powder. The fragrance became the basis for the classic powder scent, with packaging design by Leon Bax, set designer for Diaghilev Seasons, Diaghilev Belarus. That is why, searching for the appropriate form for this scent for the exhibition, we've decided to lock it in the sham powder box with a famous print on it. Let me show you the video again.
Буквально где-то под мостом из-под полы люди кричат «Духи на вес, духи на грамм, шипр, ореган, Коти». И вот в частности Лориган Коти, который является идейным прародителем Красной Москвы, это тоже пряная восточно-цветочная композиция, представлена у нас здесь в винтажном формате, вот на такой пуховке. Аромат Лориган Коти винтажный на нашей выставке представлен вот в таком формате. Это жестяная шкатулка, на которой нанесен принт, разработанный Леоном Бакстом, ни много ни мало, еще до революции. Здесь у нас находится пуховка. И дальше под пуховкой у нас есть такая перфорация, характерная для каждой женской пудры, потому что Лориган Коти – это типичный аромат женской пудры любой в 20 веке. И под ней находится у нас такой каркас, в котором вставлен пропитанный ароматом винтажный Лориган Коти 905 года, гипсовый такой кубик. И, собственно, вот он нам создает вот это вот распространение аромата. Пахнет только пуховка. Мы не случайно выбрали такую экспедиционную форму, потому что аромат Лориган Коти стал классической одушкой для всех женских пудр в 20 веке. Запах Москвы 30-х годов.
Okay, let's go on. During the NEP years, the key players of the economy were trusts, associations of enterprises operating on the principle of cost accounting, and that is financially self-sufficiency. In 1922, the State Association of Fat and Bone Processing Plants was established, and its name was Trust Жиркость, better known as TG. the spelling was rather unusual because the word Teje, just the Russian abbreviations are formed usually the other way. But in this case, that we received not only two letters, Te and Je, but we have had the very word Teje written like it's a real word. And screenwriter Viktor Shklovsky observed that probably Teje sounded entirely French, and which was understandable for Moscow audiences because it rhymed with dragé or négligé, or maybe easily joined by the other French perfumery names such as Brocard, Raleigh, Cathy, Teje. So it felt like the same thing. The abbreviation Teje did not come to use immediately, but it ultimately outlived the trust itself, becoming the byword for the entire beauty industry for many years. There was a popular rhyme at that time saying Teje on the cheeks, Teje on the lips, Teje on the brows, but where does one kiss? At different times, the trust included around a dozen of factories. Perfumery and soap factories number 4 and number 5, better known as Svoboda, Novozarya, and former Raleigh and Brocard manufacturers, produced fragrant products for consumers. However, raw materials for perfume and cosmetics production included not only floral essences, but also far less romantic substances: beef, mutton, bone tallow, palm and coconut oils that added a particular soapiness, lard, horse fat, olein, petroleum, naphthalene, olive oil waste. All these were processed at stearin factory number 1, soap factory number 2, also known as Krasny Mulavar, glue factory number 6, and other trust enterprises, and the smell was decidedly unpleasant. The Soviet authorities saw printing as an effective means of promoting proletarian culture to the masses. However, the transition to the new visual aesthetic was slower than desired. Advertising images of nap-era beauties with decadent makeups and dressed in the latest European fashions still offended workers and collective farmers. It was not easy to sell beauty products without using alluring female imagery. Teje's products became the main target of criticism. However, the very names of the goods, nymph, Manon, ideal of dreams, did not suggest revolutionary packaging, right? The Vigilant Critic in 1929 calculated that out of 400 perfume names, only 8 had any connection to the revolutionary ideas at that time in any way. And for every soap named Pioneer, there were dozen soaps named Saida, Foxtrot, Sweet Pea, and any other things. The designer of Red Moscow, artist Andrei Yevseyev, who had been working with the factory since Brocard era, did it the other way. Most of his labels were created in classical style. On the wrapper of Esmeralda soap, for instance, was a woman's profile, while others featured flowers. But the packaging of Red Moscow was quite another matter. There was no female figure here, not even a hint of a perfume scent, no irises, no carnations. This design speaks directly to Moscow itself. The bottle is minimalist, with delicate fluting and tight stopper topped with a dome-shaped finial reminiscent of St. Basil's Cathedral. The box design nods to various eras of the city's past. Red Moscow appears both as the capital of avant-garde and the heir to Byzantium. The rich, regal palette, red, white, gold, and overall ornate appearance are likely inspired by the architecture of Old Moscow. The golden flourishes and the rhythmic zigzag lines, though borrowed from the Art Deco style then fashionable in the West. The red 5-pointed star on the Red Moscow powder box even foreshadowed the ruby stars that would later be mounted on the Kremlin's tower in the late 30s. So here, this imagery is not presented even in the exhibition. So you are the first who take a look at this. So here I wanted to show some references that probably were used in the packaging design of Red Moscow. On the right, we have visuals of old Moscow architectural styles, and below there are some revolutionary etiquettes and posters and magazine covers. Most sources agree that the perfume Red Moscow was created in 1924-25 at the Novaya Zarya factory in Moscow, and its creator is believed to be Auguste Michel, a perfumer of French origin. However, as I've said previously, no archival documents or contemporary press mention the perfume's launch. Factory meeting transcripts from the early 20s briefly reference the development of an expensive perfume commissioned by the People's Commissariat for Foreign Trade. So I think it is possible that Red Moscow was originally ordered for export as part of a state contract. The broader Soviet public would only meet Red Moscow in the 30s when it appeared at the Tage catalogs and shops. Auguste Michel, or in Russian Avgust Ippolitovich, was born in the south of France, where the art of perfumery and soap making was thrived for more than a century, passed down from generation to generation. And from childhood, Michel trained his sense of smell, and according to his contemporaries, could distinguish up to 3,000 scents. Yet he could hardly have sniffed out the path fate had in store for him. Michel began his career at the La Motte Perfume House in Marseille, in France, but in the beginning of the century he decided to try his luck in faraway Russia and moved to Moscow. There he worked both for Brocard and for Brocard's main rival, Rallet. The 1917 revolution caught Avgust Ippolitovich off guard. While his former Rallet colleague Ernest Beau returned to his homeland and under the patronage of Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich met Coco Chanel and created Chanel No. 5, Michel raced around Moscow trying to have his lost French passport replaced. And so Michel remained in Russia, joining the greatly reduced staff of the factory where he had previously worked. The master of the old school, Avgust Ippolitovich, quickly proved that without him and without his expertise and experience and knowledge, restarting perfume production in the Soviet Union would be no easy task. He worked at Novaya Zarya for several years, but instead of creating the Empress's favorite bouquet for the imperial family, now he was developing soap fragrance called My Grandmother's Bouquet for the proletariat. He also served as deputy to the factory's director, Andrei Zvezdov. He oversaw the laboratory, he trained his successors, and having created Red Moscow, Michel joined the staff of the Svoboda factory at the end of 1924. Anyway, he remained involved with the Zhirkost Trust with Tage at least until the late 30s, creating fragrances and overseeing raw material production, as evidenced by archival records for of his business trips. Michel helped develop essential oil plantations in the southern republics of the USSR. For example, in 1936, 14 collective farms across the country were cultivating fragrant plants, and Michel incidentally preferred nature to laboratory. What is he here for? To produce dreadful soap that smells of tar and perfume with ridiculous anti-perfume names? This is how the writer Mikhail Loskutov described the bewilderment of Auguste Michel, stranded in the Soviet Russia, in the essay published in 1937. The last known mention of the perfumer in the press dates to 22nd of June 1939, exactly 2 years before the beginning of the Great Patriotic War. After that, Michel disappears from the public eye. One theory suggests that he was evacuated to the southern republics of the USSR and never returned. The date and place of his death remain unknown. And this is the most probably interesting part. For the exhibition, we've created a perfume organ showcasing 7 key notes of Red Moscow: bergamot, coriander, clove, jasmine, iris, tonka bean, and aldehyde C12. Let me show how it works and how it looks like.
в большом городе. Этот в большом городе. Этот несуществующий в природе музыкальный инструмент призван проиллюстрировать 7 ключевых нот парфюма «Красная Москва». Всего в составе этих духов более 60 ингредиентов, но мы выбрали 7 самых колоритных, самых узнаваемых. Среди них, конечно, ирис на первом месте, потому что вся композиция «Красной Москвы» строится вокруг.
So let me comment below. This installation is inspired by a perfumer's workstation. The table with rows of semicircular shelves filled with fragrant bottles is known as perfume organ. Continuing this musical metaphor, the perfume lexicon abounds in them. Notes, accords, compositions. We have created an interactive instrument that allows you to experience the main notes of Red Moscow separately and in combination by adjusting their concentration in the airflow. So you can control your olfactory experience using this console, created especially for this exhibition.
Визуализировали этот парфюмерный орган и представили его в виде реально существующего органа, который управляется при помощи специального пульта. В составе «Красной Москвы» более 60 ингредиентов, и за 100 лет формула не раз претерпевала изменения. Но все равно в основе ее оставалось примерно тот же самый набор ингредиентов. В центре композиции ирисы, которые в нашем случае представлены в виде иралии, синтетическое душистое вещество, изобретенное и запатентованное компанией Фермениш, которая сегодня предоставила нам всю начинку для парфюмерного органа. И вокруг ириса происходит такая вот цветочная композиция. Это есть жасмин, реализованный у нас в виде гидеона, гвоздики.
So a few words from those who created this installation, so this device.
Партнер выставки и отвечаем за альфакторное сопровождение, чтобы звучание ароматов на выставке оставалось как можно более эффективным на протяжении всей выставки. И вот он наш парфюмерный орган. Что мы здесь видим? Какой-то черный пульт с крутилками, вертелками, кнопками. Трубы, которые напоминают настоящий орган. Все по-музыкальному. И здесь, кстати, есть даже инструкция, ее неплохо было бы почитать перед использованием. Вы подходите к органу как настоящий парфюмер, как Август Мишель.
And so how it is organized below.
Берете, нажимаете на разные кнопки и чувствуете аромат.
So you can activate different scents.
Для этого вы выворачиваете
Or make your own composition.
какого-либо из ароматов,
and then you press
the
the sum button, and you feel in the air the composition that you've just created.
Если же вы хотите смешать 2 или 3 ноты, вы делаете тоже легендарный аромат.
And this is how it works.
Входят прямо из потолочной части, там, где расположены наши устройства. Это специальные такие гаджеты, они соединены с пультом проводами, и когда вы нажимаете на какую-то кнопку здесь, оттуда начинает идти аромат. И так как устройства 2, они смешивают между собой разные ароматы. А в каждом устройстве находится по 6 картриджей. Ну, в данном случае у нас всего 7 ароматов, поэтому мы их разбросали по 2 устройствам. Но это не влияет на общее качество. Можно увеличивать, можно 12, если хотите, можно 36. В целом, я думаю, что любой парфюмер был бы доволен. А вот этот вот малыш, это на самом деле самая основная часть нашей разработки, это картридж. Благодаря нему мы можем как раз и управлять ароматами, и их подавать. Сюда вкручивается такая бутылочка с ароматом, и дальше устанавливается в устройство. Но сам картридж, он не глупый, он имеет чип памяти, благодаря которому устройство распознает аромат, который в него вы установили. Что это дает? Ну, естественно, вы не путаетесь в бутылочках, а просто устанавливаете аромат туда, куда вам нужно, в любой порт свободный, и пользуйтесь.
Daria, just a heads up that we're kind of running sort of into time, just so you know. You asked me to warn you.
Okay. Let's go on. In Russian Empire, there was no domestic production of synthetic aromatic substances, and all perfumery ingredients were imported. And by mid-20s, imports and returned to pre-revolutionary levels. At the same time, it became clear that to the management of Tage that the industry needed to achieve independence in raw materials and establish its own plantations of aromatic plants, laboratories, and factories. By that time, development of perfumery had become unthinkable without synthesis of aromatic compounds, and the USSR understood this very well. That is why in 1927 Tajest established an experimental factory. Its research laboratory was headed by Lydia Brusova, the younger sister of the famous poet Valery Brusov. Lydia Brusova devoted her entire life to teaching, and she was awarded the title of professor in 1936. And thanks to research of Brusova, her colleagues, and her students, it became possible in the pre-war years to produce coumarin, eugenol, isoeugenol, heliotropin, vanillin, jasminaldehyde, muscatone, and industrial scale more than 100 aromatic components in total. In the 20s, more than 40% of Soviet female scientists worked in natural sciences, and almost a quarter of them were chemists. The perfumery and cosmetic industry was always considered a very feminine field. However, this had less to do with the deliberate inclusion of women and more to do with the fact that men both sought out and had access to higher paying jobs rather than taking positions as laboratory assistants. Nevertheless, many female laboratory assistants excelled in academic research and would go on to lead major production facilities in the USSR. We describe how the raw materials appeared at the perfumer's desk. The first track was natural, and the network of essential oil factories and state farms was established across the whole country, comprising 25 facilities in different regions. And by the end of the first five-year plan, these enterprises were producing up to 78 tons of coriander oil annually, 4 tons of clary sage oil, 3 tons of geranium oil. And within 10 years, they had not only achieved independence from imported raw materials, but had also begun exporting essential oils. And by mid-30s, the perfumery and cosmetics industry had become one of the most profitable sectors within the food industry in the USSR. Traditionally, perfumery relied only on natural ingredients, but since the mid-19th century, thanks to advances in organic chemistry, perfumers have had access not only to new synthetic aromatic compounds, but also to older ones that have become more accessible. Some of them are cheaper and easier to recreate in the laboratory. By the late 30s, the USSR had established industrial scale production of coumarin, nianon, eugenol, and other aromatic substances. So these are 2 tracks of receiving raw materials. Then, Comrade Jemchuzhina, very important person. During the years of the first 5-year plans, 1928 till 1937, the Novaya Zarya factory and later the entire perfume and cosmetics industry was overseen by the prominent communist Polina Zhemchuzhina. After the death of Nadezhda Alliluyeva, Stalin's wife, in 1932, she, and as the wife of the chairman of the Council of People Commissars, Vyacheslav Molotov, effectively became the first lady of the USSR. This unofficial status was secured not only by her marriage to a high-ranking official, but also by her own achievements. Jemchuzhina was the only woman within Stalin's inner circle to build such an outstanding career. Jemchuzhina was a party moniker derived from her real name Pearl, and Jemchuzhina means pearl in Russian. She was assigned to Novaya Zarya factory after the graduation, and this was the beginning of the first 5-year plan. And the party cell secretary, as a party cell secretary, Polina was tasked with ensuring the factory's success in the socialist competition, setting up production, supplying raw materials, equipment, and labor. She tackled the job with great enthusiasm, and shortly after giving birth to her daughter, she returned to the factory as director, and later she became the head of the whole TG, the whole trust. Jemchuzhina proved the value of state investment in the development of the industry, and under her leadership, TG production and sales quadrupled. In 1935, she traveled abroad with this Auguste Michel and her colleagues to study leading foreign practices. She was most impressed by American factories. Everything there was automated, and only 33 people worked in the soap production workshop instead of 600 like in Soviet factories. And she wrote to her husband Vyacheslav Molotov, "Then this is the kind of factory I dream about, and I'm sure that with your help and with help of Stalin, we will be able to make it reality." Once Joseph Stalin asked her, "Well, Polina Semyonovna, how are you doing? Managing all right?" And she replied, "We're producing such lovely perfumes now. Red Dawn, Red Poppy, everyone is so pleased." And Stalin nodded. "I can tell you smell very nice." "Oh, of course, it's a very nice scent," Polina Semyonovna beamed at the compliment. And then one of Nadezhda Allelueva's relatives said, "Come on, Polina, you are wearing French perfume. It's Chanel number 5. That is why it smells so nice." And of course, both she and her husband Molotov had hard time. There were always plenty of ill wishers around. The Kremlin wives criticized her for her love of luxury, while she used Chanel number 5 and sent first to her American friend Marjorie Davis, the wife of the U.S. Ambassador Davis. Nevertheless, during using her closeness to Stalin, she lobbied the transfer of her trust to the other to the jurisdiction of the other People's Commissariat. 1 year later, Жемчужина became the deputy of Anastas Mikhayan. The other, his deputy, was this Vasily Zotov, in the name of whom exists this factory, which now serves us as a venue for the exhibition. Anyway, Жемчужина made a fantastic career, and by 1939 she became People's Commissariat of Fishing Industry. And however, it took only half a year, and in the summer of 1939, several of her closest associates were subjected to repression, and by the end of the year, Polina was dismissed from her post and appointed head of the main directorate of textile industry. So she lost her post of People's Commissar. With the outbreak of war, Polina Жемчужина was evacuated to Kuibyshev, now Samara, where she became closely involved with the Jewish Anti-Fascist Committee. And when the USSR launched its campaign against cosmopolitanism in 1984, 48, pardon. Жемчужина was first expelled from the party and later arrested, and then she spent 5 years into exile in Kazakhstan, and was rehabilitated only after Stalin's death. Just in the day of Stalin's funeral, she was given freedom. Then Taje Stor. In the pages of Вечерняя Moskva in the mid-30s, one could read about a marvelous device that appeared in the Trust brand shops, a cologne vending machine. You could insert a coin and sample a few different scents. By that time, the range of perfumes and cosmetics had expanded significantly, and by 1936 alone, over 300 varieties were produced. Most importantly, however, attitudes towards these products had shifted. Although once considered a petty bourgeois indulgence, perfume had become a legitimate part of life of any cultured Soviet citizen, and especially of Soviet woman. Cologne has become firmly established in the everyday life of Soviet women. Tens of thousands of bottles of cologne are used daily in hair salons across the Soviet Union, the proudly reported the press. And the very femininity of the 30s no longer flew on the wings of a revolutionary Valkyrie. It now demanded neatness, charm, moderate attractiveness, and above all, convenience for both the family and society as a whole. And the woman had transformed from an equal comrade in arms into a decorative asset to the collective. As in other branches of beauty industry, the sales departments of perfumes and cosmetics were primarily staffed by women, obviously. Next, Taje operated numerous shops in the capital and beyond, but its most luxurious branch opened in 1936 in the ground floor of the Hotel Moskva, built under the direction of architect Alexei Shusev, just within a stone's throw of the Kremlin. The shop was designed as a model salon with elegant tables with rotating displays replaced traditional counters. The walls and columns adorned with bronzed capitals were faced in artificial marble, and the shop's range reflected the taste and means of elite rather than those of working class. And in 1937, for example, the female tram driver in Moscow earned 120 rubles per month, while a gift box of Red Moscow perfume cost 115 rubles. The Hotel Moskva shop also included a beauty parlor where visitors could get a manicure or a hand massage, for example. And here in this zone in Teja store, visitors finally have an opportunity to experience the Red Moscow fragrance, recreated in its richest concentration using the most expensive raw materials authentic to the USSR of the 30s. Additionally, perfumer Julia Makarova, who has access to the archives of the Novaya Zarya factory, has reconstructed vintage scents that disappeared from the factory's range. Let me show you a bit. How does it look like? So this is this zone.
Он был открыт в 1936 году. Она находится на первом этаже гостиницы «Москва».
Here we have another Floriental chef-d'oeuvre, red poppy, rose chypre crinoline, sweet white flowery magnolia, and well known since pre-revolutionary epoch eau de cologne Severny. Packaging was primarily designed by Kazimir Malevich, as people says. The fragrances themselves are applied to plastic tactile models of these often quite originally decorated bottles. And in this way, we provide a full-fledged multisensory experience of Soviet vintage perfumery. So you can touch it, you can smell it, you can look at it. And this is how it's organized.
Аромат наносится на этот кожаный носитель. Это не обработанная, не окрашенная кожа. Вот, и она не обладает явственным каким-то таким классическим, типичным для кожи запахом сама по себе и хорошо хранит ароматы благодаря своей ворсистости, пористой структуре и вообще яркий белоцветочный аромат, в котором солируют все друг друга копировали, повторяли, ну и просто так было, наверное, проще жить. Так вот, да, наш парфюмер, вот он базируется на Урале. Поэтому при реконструкции этого аромата мы опирались в первую очередь на воспоминания и парфюмеров, и на описание тех свидетелей, которые этот парфюм застали. Известно, что это такой скорее шипровый, розово-яблочный такой аромат. Вот. Коллективный труд, скажем так, коллективное авторство этого флакона, но форма его супер узнаваема. Наверное, он был у многих, и у многих даже наших сверстников, у кого там оставались у бабушках и у дедушек на дачах или каких-нибудь сервантах, опять же. Вот, очень узнаваемый образ и очень классический одеколон. Одеколон был выпущен...
And so here is the perfumer
Красного
who created this.
и Магнолии. Это рецептуры, которые достались нашей фабрике «Уральские самоцветы» еще со времен Новой Зари. То есть это прямо каталог рецептур фабрики «Новая Заря». У нас в каталоге рецептур это был обозначен 1963 год, но по достоверным данным эти рецептуры действительно были еще 30-х годов.
And from the Teja store, we arrive to another point, the new Moscow of the 30s. I understand that we are running out of time, and so I'm trying to do my best. And
it's no problem. And just for folks who have to take off, just we'll send you the video. So feel free to carry on with your day, and you'll be able to follow it later.
Okay. So in the 30s, semantics of the red color returned to its roots. Until recently, red had carried propagandistic meaning associated with the revolutionary banner and delegate's headscarf, and now red simply meant beautiful, blooming, well-fed, and rosy. Moscow had become the showcase of Soviet prosperity. In 1935, the first line of the Moscow metro opened, and all Moscow was arguing over which station was the most beautiful. And under the general plan for the city's reconstruction, streets were transformed into wide avenues, and the foundations of the Palace of Soviets were being laid on the site of the demolished Christ the Savior Cathedral. Perfumer Auguste Michel recalled that in the mid-30s he was asked to create a perfume called Palace of the Soviets. "Sure, I can create the smell of the lime mortar for you, but no one will buy it," the Frenchman said in confusion. He had to try nonetheless, but the scent of socialist construction was rejected by the Artistic Council. Consumer euphoria was captured in propaganda and advertising, though in reality it was a result of hunger and scarcity, not abundance. Describing the selection at the delicatessen on Gorky Street, formerly Yeliseevsky shop, the newspaper boasted, "The grocery department offers 30 8 varieties of sausage, 20 of them new. The confectionery section has 2,000 types of biscuits and sweets. The bakery, 50 different types of baked goods. And in the fish department, pools of live mirror carp, bream, pike, and crucian carp. Shoppers choose their fish, which is scooped from the pools with nets. Anyway, the modesty of 20s gave way to an ostentatious celebration of life, so much that the early 30s were nicknamed Neo-NEP, so Neo-New Economic Policy. And new public parks opened across the city. Masquerades were held. People danced the foxtrot, listened to jazz, and above all, laughed freely. Among the slogans heard at the 1935 City Carnival in Gorky Park were such as "Make the last one laugh," "No laughs, no snacks." Decorations played central role in this collective socialist performance. The author of the May Day report from the park struggled to find words of his admiration. One cannot describe the garden of abundance that sprung up beside the Manege building, a garden where sausages grow on trees. A stroll through this grove would be enough to whet your appetite, but satisfying this appetite was another matter entirely. Private enterprise had been outlawed, and the state became the sole distributor of goods. Collectivization, drought, the crop failures led to severe shortages, but in their first 5-year plan, the government's focus remained on heavy industry. In 1928, a rationing system was introduced across the whole country. Food was no longer something one purchased freely. Instead, people queued and asked, "What are we queuing for?" Expressions such as "hard to get" began appearing in the urban vocabulary in the 30s and would become hallmarks of the Soviet everyday for decades. The memoirs of a Muscovite describes, "Our plague is in the brazen lies of some, the hypocrisy of others, and the refusal of the rest to look into the abyss. The worst part of this plague is that it's happening against the backdrop of a wonderful Moscow summer. People going to dachas, buying watermelons, admiring flowers, chasing down the latest books and trendy records, saving the furniture for the new flats, and only in passing, in hushed tones, speaking of those who disappeared the night before." Big terror was in full swing in 1937-1938. One of the victims of the repressions, Olga Adamova-Slosberg, recalls that when she returned home from work after a search of her apartment, the first thing she noticed was the unfamiliar smell of leather boots and tobacco. The smell of tobacco is generally a common male olfactory characteristic in Russian literature, although at that time women had also begun to smoke. In this case, it was not just a male sign, but an olfactory hallmark of special service officers, along with the smells of leather boots and leather clothing and in general. Antonina Pirashkova, a Soviet metro engineer, writes about how she sent handkerchiefs scented with her perfume to her arrested husband, writer Isaac Babel, so that he would have a pleasant memory of her while in detention. Pirashkova, by the way, was a prominent engineer of Moscow Metro, and she and her colleagues designed many of its stations, to Kievskaya, Paveletskaya, Arbatskaya, Mayakovskaya, and many others. The symbolic sense of this bipolar Stalinist Moscow, both weirdly sweet and dangerous, are also kept in the specialist scent boxes near the cinema screens. So this is how it looks like. For many Muscovites, the capital was long associated with the smell of chocolate. Pyatnitskaya Street was filled with the scent of the Rotfront factory, while near the Udarnik cinema, Red October sweetened the air. On Leningradsky Prospect, as Ivan Katayev wrote in 1932, stood Bolshevik factory, once old Siu, named after Adolphe Siu, French perfumer. With its gingerbread red brick facade, in the late century industrial style with perfumed aromas of the Third Republic pressing eastward, and grey-mustached French artisans who guarded the secrets of biscuit making and occasionally pinched the girls in passing. Speaking of biscuits, a pastry at the Babayev confectionery shop cost 15 kopecks, and the same as the cinema ticket for children. And there was much to see at the cinema. It was the golden age of uplifting Soviet musical comedy, with Lyubov Orlova on screens. She was rumored to be a devoted fan of Red Moscow perfume, though there is no surviving evidence to this. In the film Circus, filmed in 1936 by Grigory Alexandrov, however, one can spot a large bottle of Flower Festival perfume in the background. Otherwise, the recipe of a 30s Soviet film fairy tale was simple: songs, dances, laughter, dash of eroticism, and pinch of patriotism. Some believe that Circus, directed by Grigory Alexandrov, with his wife Lyubov Orlova, was a tribute to the new constitution adopted in Soviet Union in 1936. New Moscow, filmed in 1938 by Alexander Medvedkin, was cinematic manifesto of the city's reconstruction. In the film, buildings moved as if by magic, and the ghost of the unfinished palace of the Soviets loomed in the background. But beneath the ground, real palaces had already been built, palaces accessible to everyone. Moscow historian Yuri Fedosyuk was among the first to descend into the metro. He was still a child and remembered for the rest of his life. It smelled strongly of plaster and whitewash, and some finishing work was still underway. But the sense of wonder was overwhelming. The distinct smell of metro remained in Muscovites' memories for years. It smelled of creosote. Creosote is a byproduct of wood and coal tar distillation with sharp, tarry, phenolic smell. It was used to treat railway sleepers to prevent decay. And in the end, during Great Patriotic War, the Novaya Zara factory was evacuated to the Urals and worked mainly to meet the needs of the front, and the production of perfumery was pushed into the background. But the demand for it did not disappear even in the darkest times. In the letters of frontline soldiers and the memoirs of siege survivors, Red Moscow appears again and again. And now it is more than just a perfume. It is a symbol of a lost, peaceful life. And then the fame. So Red Moscow reached the height of its popularity among Soviet women in the post-war years, becoming truly widespread perfume. And the fame of Red Moscow did not fade for a long time since that moment. It was as if the perfume matured alongside an entire generation of Soviet women, and we can trace the evolution of the Red Moscow wearer from schoolgirl to elderly woman through scattered lines in the films of the decades that followed. So in 50s, the main character gives Krasnaya Moskva to his younger sister, who is finishing school at that time. In 60s, Krasnaya Moskva stands in the nightstand of Anfisa, a young and naughty worker in the logging industry, and Anfisa is like 25 or 28 years old. In 70s, Soviet perfume is used on screen by women going through another divorce and midlife crisis. In the 80s, Krasnaya Moskva will be given on the occasion of meeting the future mother-in-law, and so the one who the woman who uses Krasnaya Moskva is already 45 or 50 years old. And on the other screen, we're showing how the imported French perfumery appears in the Soviet shops, because in 1958, during Khrushchev thaw, Red Moscow spilled beyond its Soviet bottle and spread westward. It won the Grand Prix at the International Industrial Exhibition in Brussels. And it would be at least 10 years before this and other imported perfumes became more widely available in the closed-off Soviet market. So in 60s, Chanel number 5, says policeman thoughtfully as he sniffs the note with the hotel address, and yet Chanel number 5 appears on screen. It was nearly impossible to obtain it in real life in 60s. 70s, the most famous Russian film, The Irony of Fate, Klima by Lancôme, became available in the 70s and quickly won hearts of Soviet women. This is why this perfume, and not Krasnaya Moskva, is given by Ippolit to his fiancée Nadia. 80s, the story makes another collapse, another change. Perfume in Soviet films used to signify a character's elevated status, but perestroika toppled that what once was seemed unshakable, and thus, to impress his new acquaintances, Ivan, the hero of the film Courier, has taken 2 bottles of French fragrance Madame Rachat and promptly drank it. And in the end, we are showing the we are showing the installation by contemporary Moscow artist Irina Korina entitled Collection of Illusions, which plays a popular piece of furniture of the Soviet interior, the servant cabinet. Such cabinet was found in the most Soviet living rooms. It has two-part structure and expresses the dichotomy of Soviet consumer culture. In the upper section behind the glass, there are souvenirs from behind the Iron Curtain, maybe some perfumes, some stuff which you don't use on daily basis, but it's just there to make an impression. And in the lower section behind opaque doors lay the true nature of the Soviet person, frightened by constant shortages. Here were often stored year-long supplies of sugar, canned goods, bedding, and other items that its experience shows were worth keeping in reserve. So this is the final accord of the exhibition. Also, we have a large public program, including lectures, scent laboratories, smell walking tours in Moscow, and soon will be another short conference entitled "What Does the City Smell Like?" Devoted to olfactory studies of local cultural heritage. Speaking of results, we have a lot of partners. The exhibition was made in tough timing, only in 6 months, which is difficult when you borrow pieces of art from the other museums, and because a lot of artifacts were not available at the moment. But anyway, 25 institutions and private collections took part, and I have to mention here the private collection of Irina Vorobyova, who has probably the most impressive collection of perfumes and soaps and posters and ads and household items. More than 20 pieces she gave to us. 200. We displayed 20 scents in the exhibition, but all of them are carefully packed in special interactive zones or scent boxes decorated according to the specific part of the narrative. And nowadays, in 2 months, the exhibition was visited 5,000 times, setting a record for the Zotov Center. And every event from the public program attracts up to 150 offline guests. So the exhibition sparkled a great deal of interest among different age groups because older women remember about their youth. Zoomers, as many research shows, experience a hard-to-explain nostalgia for the past that they never lived through. My peers gladly bring both their mothers and their younger sisters to a trendy exhibition that everyone is talking about in social media these days. So the exhibition met a lot of enthusiasm in Moscow publics. This is the end. Thank you for attention. Here's some links and contacts. All the videos are available in my YouTube channel. Thank you.
Yeah, Daria, thank you so much. That was fascinating. And I just want to take a moment to commend you because, not only did you do all the research, but you presented all that research in this gorgeously designed exhibition with innovative technology. I mean, like, well done. It's incredibly impressive. And I'm only sorry that I can't come to Moscow and visit it myself. Yeah, just keep up the good work. We're all behind you.
Thank you for your support.
Oh, my pleasure.
That means a lot.
Of course. All right, folks, thank you for your time. And we'll see you all on the internet or in person, hopefully soon enough.